welcome to Games as Lit 101. Well, there's been yet another delay for the Little Inferno analysis, but thankfully this should be the last one. In the meantime, I was left with little time or opportunity to actually produce anything for you guys, so I figured now would be the time for something that's relatively easy to make: a countdown. So let's talk about 8-bit music. This refers to the music of an early era of gaming, right around the time that home consoles were beginning to gain some popularity. Video games at the time weren't able to process or store actual live audio recordings, so instead they relied on sounds made by the computer, and this resulted in the beeps and boops that we now associate with classic video games. Due to the simplicity of composing music that could only play 3 unique tones at a time and had to be designed in brief, looping melodies, many of the most memorable and catchy tunes of the video game medium were composed in this style. And as you might expect, some of them are absolutely awesome. So today, I'm outlining my top 5 favorite 8-bit songs. Now for some ground rules. Firstly, I can only choose one song from any given game or series. This is only really here because otherwise the list would probably look something like this. Second, we are talking specifically about 8-bit, or at least chiptune music here. For instance, the original Nintendo Entertainment System utilized 8-bit music, but the Super Nintendo, with games like Chrono Trigger or Super Mario World, those are 16-bit, and they have some more discernible instrument sounds. I mean, if we included that era, the list would probably look something like this. Third, while I am restricting myself to chiptune music, I'm not necessarily going to stick to only technically 8-bit music, if only because there have actually been a lot of games and soundtracks that have come out since the era where that kind of music was necessary that have still used the same kind of music and just not necessarily restricted themselves to things like the 3-tone limit, and I think that kind of music deserves to be included. Fourth, we are making a distinction between best and most influential or most memorable. The original Mario theme, for instance, is great fun. I absolutely love it, and there's a good reason it's embedded in all of our social consciousness. That said, I do believe the series has actually had better music since then, so don't necessarily expect to see all of the most well-remembered and beloved songs on this list. This is about the best music, not necessarily the most well-remembered. And finally, this list is obviously based on my own personal opinion, and you are under no obligation to agree or disagree with any of the choices on this list. I mean, I obviously have not played every single 8-bit video game out there, and I'm far from some sort of musical expert whose opinion you must respect in this regard or anything like that. So, with all that out of the way, let's get started on the top 5 8-bit video game songs. Number 5. The main theme of Final Fantasy II, known also as The Promised Land. Note that this is the actual second Final Fantasy. I know they called the 4th game Final Fantasy II in America because they skipped a few and didn't think we were smart enough to understand that, but I'm talking about the actual second game. And trust me, choosing this song was no easy task. Nobuo Uematsu is my favorite composer of all time, and his Final Fantasy soundtracks are home to his best work. Seriously, I had 5 other serious contenders from this series, and it pains me to leave them out, but ultimately I just loved this song so much. While 2 is far from my favorite game in the series, it put a lot of effort into making a more mature and complex story than the first game, making it about 4 friends who are separated and turned against one another in a brutal war. And this serious tone was reflected in the overworld theme, which abandoned the fun, exploratory tone of the previous game's overworld theme in favor of a far more somber, haunting tune. The echoey sound of the main theme and the simplicity of the harmony in the background just drapes a melancholy feeling over the whole game, and it's without a doubt one of the most hauntingly beautiful 8-bit songs I've ever heard. I think it more than deserves a spot on this list as my number 5 8-bit song of all time. Number 4. Versus Trainer from Pokemon Red and Blue. The first thing to this song's credit is that it is long. I mean, for the era. Video game songs had to loop infinitely, so the player never ran out of background music, and your average loop was probably around 30 seconds to a minute long, and rarely any longer than that. This loop is nearly 2 minutes long, and it goes through so many movements, each equally exciting in a different way, whether sounding victorious, desperate, or frantic. It sounds surprisingly complex for an 8-bit song, and that keeps it exciting as it moves through each of its unique parts. It's a really exciting song for some really exciting battles, which makes it a no-brainer for my favorite Pokemon song and my 4th favorite 8-bit video game song. Number 3. Scorching Back from Cave Story. If you haven't played Cave Story, you really should. I mean, the original game is actually free, and its many remakes are easily available, and it's just an awesome game. In no small part due to the fantastic 8-bit soundtrack that feels genuinely like you're playing a classic action game. This particular song plays later in the game, when you come back to one of the first areas you ever visited to see all hell breaking loose there. When you first visited this place, you were just getting a real grasp of the game and likely did a lot of exploring and messing around just trying to get a handle on things. You know this area well. And now it's in such a terrible state, it feels like some kind of personal assault, and the desperate excitement of this music is the perfect backdrop for that experience. There have been a number of remakes of this soundtrack as the game has been ported around to various systems, and all of them are quite excellent. I'm unsure whether the original is technically true 8-bit, but it's absolutely a nostalgic sounding chiptune worthy of the 3rd spot on this list. Number 2. The Moon from DuckTales on the NES. Listen to this intro, how magical, like, holy cow, we're going to the moon! Then it gets all exciting and, you know what, I can't even talk over it, just listen. For once, I don't even really have an explanation for this one. It's just one of the most enjoyable, adventurous, continuously upbeat, and downright magical songs I have ever heard. Many people say it's too good to be a level tune, and I'm right there with them. It sounds more like an end credits song than a random level background song, but here it is, and it fits perfectly. It's a dang good choice for my number 2. Now before we get to the number 1 song, let me give a brief shout out to some of my runners-up, if only because I'm honestly a bit too much of a fanboy to go without mentioning at least some of the other songs that I couldn't include due to either space on the list or that stupid 1 song per series rule. Super Mario Bros. 2 Overworld. This song is just too much fun. For how easily it gets stuck in your head, I feel like it doesn't get enough love anymore, but I love the heck out of it. Lavender Town. This song is freaking terrifying. Enough said. Matoya's Cave. One of the most memorable songs from the first Final Fantasy, and it's just so peaceful in a happy, upbeat sort of way, it's impossible not to love it. The Rebel Army. One of the most majestic sounding 8-bit songs I've ever heard, that's for sure. Running Hell. Nothing like rushing through the most frustratingly difficult level of the game with this crazy awesome music backing you up. Grass Town. Probably the most easily recognizable song from Cave Story, it's just too catchy not to love. the Legend of Zelda theme from Link's Awakening. The original Zelda theme is a lot of fun, but Link's Awakening updated it and made it way better, even with the same 8-bit constraints as the original. And the number 1 8-bit video game song is... Pushing Onwards from VVVVVV. I absolutely love this song. Chiptune or no, it gets me pumped up like few other songs can. And part of the reason is this incredible build-up that rivals any I've heard, let alone among its 8-bit peers. The way it starts slow, gets a bit more exciting, but keeps refraining from really delivering is an excellent source of both excitement and tension as you play the game. Then when it finally does deliver, we get what has to be one of my favorite soundtrack melody lines ever. Seriously, VVVVVV is a great game, and the soundtrack is perfectly suited for it. This is one of the most exciting video game songs I've ever heard, and it sticks in my head like nothing else. When you're switching gravity all across the spaceship and just trying to get out in one piece, nothing inspires you to hurry up and be awesome quite like this song. So those are my top 5 8-bit songs. Make sure to comment and let me know whether you think I'm a horrible person who should feel bad or a pretty cool guy who has decent taste in 8-bit music. Make sure to like Games is Literature on Facebook, follow it on Twitter, and support it on Patreon if you really like what you've seen here. Next week, we're back on our normal schedule with, finally, the literary analysis of Little Inferno. So until then, class dismissed.